companies like Facebook in the Valley with all of the great work he's done. So we're excited to get started. So join me in welcoming the great Adam Grant to Silicon Valley. And the only thing I will add to his bio, because there are two things that were not yet mentioned, because there's so much to say about Wharton's highest rated professor, is Adam was also a junior Olympic springboard diver. And if you go into YouTube and search Adam Grant, you can watch it. It's incredible. He flips, he turns, he's not speaking, there's no classroom involved. He was also a professional magician. And amongst his many other talents, he has taught my children several magic tricks, which I still can't figure out. I'm grateful for. So this is a perfect place to talk about this book, because Silicon Valley and this institution are about change and about innovation. And change and innovation is always defined by at least what we think of as an original idea, or a new application of an old idea that makes it different and creates something new in the world. So, what motivated you to write this book? Why originals?
I'm still stuck on you watching diving videos in your
I have, and so many people here will join me, right? People are joining me right now, you can see.
No, I think what motivated me was, I guess early when I was just starting out in my career, I saw a manager basically scream at one of my colleagues. And I went over to try to defend him. It was the first time I'd ever really spoken up. And I said, I think this is a bad idea, both because he's going to probably quit, and because we really desperately need him, and it was also sort of not that pleasant, right? And I ended up getting dragged by my ear into the women's bathroom by my boss's boss.
Literally? Like by the ear?
Yeah, literally by
really?
the ear. Yeah.
Wow.
And,
it's rough on the East Coast.
I thought this was actually normal treatment, but I was told that if I ever spoke out of turn again, that I would be fired too.
I'm sorry, this was as a professor at Wharton?
No. Not sure I'm at liberty to say.
Okay, but an earlier job.
Yeah.
On the East Coast.
Much earlier.
Not in California.
No. But yeah, it was a little bit traumatizing at the moment. I basically walked away realizing a few things. One, I never wanted a real job where anyone could fire me, right? So this is why you're trying to go to tenure. And two, I never ever wanted to be in a women's bathroom again.
Excellent goals.
No.
How are you doing on those two?
Success.
Not tenure.
Yeah, no more women's bathrooms either. But no, I was really interested in how do you speak up effectively, and I was struck by the fact that tons of people have good ideas for how to improve the world around them, but never say anything about it because they're afraid of getting punished or they just don't think anyone will listen. And I wanted to know how we can all get better at that.
So, how do we get better at that? Let's start with what's an original? What is an original?
An original for me is someone who has lots of creative ideas, but goes beyond just brainstorming and says, I'm going to try to make those a reality. So dreaming up the vision, but taking initiative to try to improve the world around you.
Give us examples of who are influential originals.
Not going to say Steve Jobs. No. Way too stereotypical. But people like Steve Jobs. No, I think about sort of three different kinds of presidents. So one would be really creative visionaries and inventors. The Thomas Edisons of the world, the tech pioneers of the current era would probably fit. Two would be social change agents, the suffragists, the civil rights activists. And then three, I think, are people who often don't get the attention they deserve, which are people who are working behind the scenes to create real change. So people who threw away, for example, the old system of sharing information in the intelligence industry and said, we should actually use the internet for this. I think organizational change is an overlooked form of originality.
And you had to name just a couple of influential originals who are working now. Who are they? Put some names to that.
So, I think if I were pushed, I would say J.K. Rowling is one of the greatest. Children's book was too long, apparently. I don't know about you, but I wanted it to be longer when I read Harry Potter. So, I think breaking that mold was pretty exciting. I'm a big fan of Seinfeld. I think it was a completely revolutionary TV show, and I think that we could call any of the creators originals. We could run through the list of Elon Musk, Jack Dorsey, Larry and Sergey, Mark, Sheryl, The list goes on and on.
Well, what's interesting about your first two examples is both J.K. Rowling and Seinfeld, so Harry Potter and Seinfeld, were things that were broadly rejected. Right? Seinfeld wasn't picked up because the characters were unlikable, the show was about nothing, and no one's going to watch it. And Harry Potter, the list of literary agents and publishing houses that said no to Harry Potter, I'm sure those people are quite displeased with their rejection. But it was very long because it was too long, too complicated. So both of those creative works experienced a lot of failure before success. Do you have to have failure before success? How important is that?
I don't think you have to have it before success, and I think it has to come at some point along the journey. So if you look at the data, the people who succeed the most as originals are the ones who fail the most. Because they're the ones who try the most. Look at Edison. I think Edison is such a good example. Everyone knows the light bulb story. But what about the talking doll he invented? Which was so creepy it scared not only kids, but adults too.
It is. When you're looking up his diving, look up the doll. Truly frightening.
I've had nightmares about this doll. It's terrifying. And he created that around the same time he was working on a light bulb. He also tried to mine magnets, which didn't work too well. He tried to create a fruit preservation technique that failed. And you see this in every domain. You see that Shakespeare wrote a bunch of plays that are considered duds. And he's like, yeah, but I wrote Hamlet and Macbeth, so I'm probably not right. But if you look at the data, you have to just generate a lot of volume of ideas in order to create variety and have a chance of doing something truly original.
And how do we do that? So if any of us are here and we go back to our offices or our schools or whatever, our homes tomorrow, and we say, I want to generate a whole bunch of original ideas in the hopes that one of them is, if not like that, something that's truly original. What advice do you have? How do we generate more and more original ideas?
I think the starting point is to diversify your experiences. So everyone thinks you have to be the biggest expert, the 10,000 hours of practice in order to be original, but it's not those people who do the most. It's actually the people with the broadest knowledge. So Steve Jobs said 3 decades ago that if you want to be original, you have to have different bag of experiences than everyone else. Now, the bag of experiences he chose is illegal in most states. But there is a point there, which is if you want to see the world differently, you have to go through experiences that other people haven't. So if you look at the world's most innovative fashion designers, you will see that what distinguishes them is they have more years not traveling abroad, not living abroad, but working abroad in countries different from their own.
And does it have to be working in fashion or working in anything?
It can be working in anything. It's just learning new cultural assumptions, different worldviews. So if you're American, traveling to Canada is not going to help you much. It'll help Canada.
Sorry, Tessa.
But I think also if you look at scientists, Nobel Prize winning scientists, compared to their peers, are twice as likely to play a musical instrument, 7 times as likely to draw or paint, 12 times as likely to write fiction or poetry. Again, it's 22 times as likely to perform as an actor, dancer, and yes, magician.
So in chapter 2, you talk about selecting new ideas. And you're right. When we bemoan the lack of originality in the world, we blame it on the absence of creativity. If only people could generate more novel ideas, we'd all be better off. But in reality, the biggest barrier to originality is not idea generation, it's idea selection. So the idea, and you write about this eloquently in the book, is you can generate a lot of ideas, and that's the first step. But the second step is actually picking the right ones. What advice do you have after we all learn to write plays, travel to different countries, be musicians, all the different backgrounds you do, but what advice do you have on how to pick the right ideas?
So I'm going to borrow something I learned from an extraordinary former student, Justin Berg, who is probably here in this audience. Justin, are you here?
Oh.
He is here. Good.
He is.
So everyone ask Justin. He'll give you the answer later. So Justin's a professor at Stanford, and he did this brilliant research on idea selection. So he got circus artists, like think Cirque du Soleil, to submit videos of their performances and then try to predict which ones were going to take off. And circus artists are terrible at this. They think their own acts are way better than they really are, not surprisingly. Especially the clowns, because everyone hates clowns, it turns out, even other clowns. But the other acts, there's a lot of variance, and most people are too positive on their own ideas. They fall in love with their own work. So then Justin turns to another group who looks at managers and says, can the managers predict? Well, no, they're not very good either, because they're too negative. They're looking at all the reasons that new ideas might fail, instead of looking for reasons they might succeed. So who's good at this? It turns out peers, fellow creatives. other circus performers. They have enough distance to say this act is really bad, but also, unlike managers, they're really motivated to see the potential in new ideas. And so I think we can all see more feedback from our peers, one side.
And does that work for managers too? Are managers better at selecting the ideas of other managers that are the right ones?
I think that's a study waiting to be done. But what Justin found in a follow-up experiment was you could get the managers to be more open to novelty just by shifting their mindset. So right before they evaluate other people's ideas, just have them spend 5 minutes brainstorming about their own ideas. And then they get out of this sort of evaluative, I'm going to shoot your idea down mode, and into this, I'm looking at what ideas could take off mindset.
So once we generate lots of ideas with our various backgrounds and then judge and find the right ones, we have to communicate them. And that's obviously a big challenge because challenging the status quo means we're challenging things. What advice do you have about how we challenge the status quo? Who speaks out effectively to challenge things and how do they do it?
One of the mistakes that a lot of people make is when we have an idea, we go to our most agreeable friends. They're people who are polite and welcoming, they're nice, and we expect them to cheerlead for us. And they will, but they also really don't like rocking the boat. And so they're pretty conflict averse, and so they're like, yeah, great idea, and then that's the end of the conversation. The more disagreeable people, the critical, skeptical, challenging people we know, are much more likely to tear our idea apart in the spirit of trying to make it better. But if they believe in it, they will actually then stand up for us, right? They'll run through walls for our idea. So there was a Google programmer who put this beautifully. He said, a disagreeable person who's going to support you is a great ally. Somebody with a bad user interface but a great operating system. If that helps you. Yeah, but those are the people that you want to go to with your ideas.
That's perfect. Well, friendship is a great topic to talk about with you. Adam is and has been an amazing friend in my life, and I connect so many of your former students and colleagues who say the same thing, that when people need you, you are always there. What's the role of friendship in generating ideas and selecting ideas and supporting the right communication?
I think we all need friends as allies. I think, though, that when it comes to bringing ideas to the table, sometimes your enemies are better supporters than your friends. Your friends are biased, right? Everyone knows that they're in your court and they're going to support you no matter what. If you can get someone who hates your guts to say, you know, I really don't like you, but this is a decent idea anyway, that person is a totally credible supporter. And there's a third group that I think a lot of us look to more often than our enemies, which turns out to be a bad idea, which is frenemies. So, Cheryl, I know you have no frenemies, but for others in the audience, those people that you have sometimes positive, sometimes negative interactions with, sometimes they are really friendly to your face and then stab you in the back. It turns out that the more of those that you have in your life, the worse your physical health is. It is literally physically unhealthy to maintain ties with your frenemies.
But it's okay, so the friends are good because they'll support us, and the enemies are good because they'll tell us the truth, and if they support us, they'll help the ideas come out.
Yeah, whereas these poor frenemies, it's just hard to predict, right? You're always wondering, like, are you going to have my back or are you going to stab me? I don't really know. And so you expend a tremendous amount of emotional energy trying to figure out who they are, and I think we're better off not going in with our ideas.
It's interesting because for those of you who read Adam's unbelievably great other book, it would take you a lot to say about givers and takers, and the role that if you are a giver, having takers in your life plays, if you are a taker, having givers in your life plays, and being more thoughtful about how we select the people around us. So in this one, you write about a song tapping exercise that reveals something important about communicating original ideas. Who wants to see Adam do this?
I didn't raise my hand. Sure, I can show you. So I think this is one of the most important things I've ever learned about communicating new ideas. So we can all do this. Think of a song and tap it for the person next to you to recognize it. So you're going to go like that, and the other person's going to guess it. But before you do that, come up with a probability estimate for the odds that the person near you will recognize it.
All right.
Okay, now go.
Try it. You guys pick correctly. Stay standing.
Okay, when I name your song, you can sit. Happy birthday. Row, row, row your boat. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. ABCs. Jingle bells. Mary had a little lamb. We will rock you. Beethoven's Fifth. Good, I can't even tap the third. All right, what did you have that we didn't hear yet?
Yellow Submarine and Seven Nation Army.
All right, any others? Star Wars.
Justin Bieber, sorry.
So why do we do this? I just wanted to see if people would go along with it. Probability estimates. Did anybody have 0% as their guess? Okay, were you doubting yourself or the person sitting next to you? Okay. One of the first times I ever did this exercise, Jamie Dimon was in the audience, and he said 100%. And then he turned to the direct report sitting next to him and said, if you don't get this, you're fired. he did not say that. But the guy guessed it right. So I think this is a great exercise because this was a study done right in this backyard at Stanford. And the tappers were asked to estimate, and they thought 50% of people would get it right. So 1 in 2. But then when they tapped, 1 in 40 got it right. 2.5%. The tappers are all overconfident. Why? Because when you're tapping, it's impossible to do your song without hearing the rhythm in your head. Try it. You can't do it. That makes it also humanly impossible to imagine what your disjointed tapping sounds like. There's someone who's not hearing it in their head. Right? So I'm hearing da 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 da, and you're hearing what is that? So long story short, I think this is a great metaphor for communicating original ideas. Because when you are pitching an idea to someone, you are not only hearing the song in your head, you wrote the song. Right? So you have spent weeks or months hearing that tune over and over again. It's hard to imagine what it sounds like to someone who's not hearing it. So you have to repeat it a lot. And I'm going to turn this around on your show. This is something you do beautifully. You're a big fan of repeating your message, even to the point that people will say things like lean in without quoting you. Does that bother you?
I mean, no, it's funny. Both when I was at Google and when I was at Facebook and at LinkedIn, there are times when someone will come out with someone, the CEO or someone, and then someone else will quote it, and eventually they stop quoting you. So now, I read in the paper someone's leaning into a taco. I'm thinking, that's terrific, I like tacos too. Not exactly what I meant, lean in had a specific meaning. But the truth is that if you want ideas out there and other people to adapt them, that is success. Success is when you've put an idea out to the world and other people are quoting it without quoting you because they think it's theirs. And helping people understand that is success of communication. Success in communication is not being identified with the ideas anymore. It's when those ideas become so widely accepted that they're everyone's.
I think this is such a powerful message. So I go into an organization and I'm going to go to my boss and be like, that idea you shot down 6 minutes ago? Here it is again. How do you think about repeating this when you don't have a platform where you can just naturally speak to different audiences?
I mean, I think for all of us, and I think so many people in this audience have this experience, as you become a manager, as you advocate ideas, however you're going to do it, as an author, as a researcher, as a professor, you really do have to repeat yourself over and over, and you can be bored by your own ideas because you find yourself repeating them, but it is in that repetition. I mean, how do you find that when you're in class, right? In the classroom, you teach. Students come in year over year, some of the ideas are the
same. See what you're doing here. Yeah, I find it tremendously repetitive to repeat myself. Yeah, no, it is really boring, but the point where I get bored is often the point where students get it, which is why some of them came back, apparently.
So if we're trying to advance ideas, not only do we have to repeat, but managing our own emotions is really hard. We've all seen this. You've seen the person with an idea that they can't get across that gets frustrated. And we've seen people take very optimistic approaches, maybe to how many people can guess their song, and very pessimistic approaches. If you're trying to convince people of something, you manage your own emotions in doing it, trying to put an original idea out there, is it better to be an optimist or a pessimist?
Yes.
Totally cheating.
I think we need a mix of both in the world. The optimists to see the hope for future possibilities, the pessimists to warn us about all the dangers ahead. I think a lot of great originals are skeptical optimists, where they see a tremendous amount of potential, but they're not easily duped or convinced. But there are a lot of great defensive pessimists out there. And I think sometimes you and I are both in this category.
Defensive pessimists?
Yes. So think about, like, go back to school. About a week before a big test. What do you think?
I need to study.
Okay.
What are you thinking?
I'm waking up like in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, feeling like I am not only going to fail this exam, I'm going to do so badly that my professors are going to take away points on my previous exams. Clearly, that could not have been me, right? And that anxiety motivates me to prepare and study really hard. And by the time the exam comes around, I do much better than I expect. But the next time, I convince myself, well, this time is different. I'm really going to fail. And defensive pessimists do just as well as optimists. When they have anxiety up front, that does motivate them to prepare, unless you make them happy. If you put a defensive pessimist in a good mood a few days before a big event, they will bomb because they get complacent. So if you want to sabotage a defensive pessimist, this is the way to do it.
So we're supposed to be negative defensive pessimists.
When you have lead time, you need to motivate yourself to prepare. And then as the event approaches, you want to shift from doom to some degree of excitement.
And this goes to
Good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that. This goes to one of the most interesting things I learned in the book, which is that procrastination can sometimes be good. Now, I found this very exciting because there's nothing I like less than procrastination.
I know.
You work together. You're aware of this. So explain, is procrastination good? Should we procrastinate more? Were you able to procrastinate more writing this book?
I do like the fact that sometimes you respond to emails before I hit send. I don't know how you do it. I assume there's some technology that Facebook will be releasing soon. Look, I share your style, right? Like, we're both procrastinators, where we feel this tremendous sense of urgency to start things early and finish them well ahead of schedule. But I did have a student named Jihei who gathered a bunch of data in companies, and we designed some experiments as well, showing that procrastinators are often more creative than precrastinators.
And why is that?
So part of it is incubation, right? If you're quick to start but slow to finish, then you have time for ideas to really develop. And part of it is divergent thinking. If you start right away and you finish in one sitting, you're stuck with a really linear structured plan, right? Like the to-do list and post-it notes that you love so much. But if you can put something away for a few weeks and then come back to it, you get all these unexpected connections you wouldn't have seen before. So I was writing this book, and I was going to do a chapter on procrastinating. I thought, this is the time to procrastinate. So I procrastinated on the procrastination chapter. Meta procrastination. It was horrible. It was one of the most painful things I've ever done in my life.
And how do you feel about it? This chapter's great.
It's the best chapter in the book, hands down. Largely to reduce my own cognitive dissonance, right? I have to say that. I hated writing this chapter. But I wrote half of it. I stopped in mid-sentence one day, and I put it away until the rest of the book was done, which was months later. But I came back with tons and tons of new ideas, which was great.
So similarly, you've taken a stand recently against a lot of popular ideas, right? Emotional intelligence, Myers-Briggs. Why? What's wrong with emotional intelligence, and what's wrong with Myers-Briggs?
The Myers-Briggs never should have been invented. That's a really hard.
It's a strong stance.
How
many people here have taken Myers-Briggs? How many people have used Myers-Briggs in evaluating something? It's a big stance.
Yeah, look, I think empirically it's about halfway between a horoscope and a heart monitor. No, I mean, look, it was the ideas for it were seeded back in the 1920s. Carl Jung invented these three categories for understanding differences between people. And then Isabel Myers and Catherine Briggs got together and said, we're gonna try to create an assessment to help people understand themselves. They added a fourth category because they knew someone who could fit in the first three, essentially. And then they basically went commercial with this in the 1950s. And we have a half century of evidence on how to look at personality now, which basically says, the way you do science is, instead of making these categories up, you go out in the world and you figure out what are the real differences between people that matter, and then you build your frameworks from the ground up. And we have other frameworks that work that way, like the Big Five, Hogan, StrengthsFinder, there are many that are much more valid. So Brian Little, my favorite psychologist, is fond of saying, look, it's not that the Myers-Briggs is fatally flawed. It's just that why would you go and try to turn a Dodge Caravan into a Rolls Royce? So, emotional intelligence, you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
I have no strong opinions on the matter. No, I broke up with the Myers-Briggs a couple of years ago, finally, and said that if they
How
wanted
was
me...
that? Rough?
I mean, I think it hurt probably them more than it hurt me. No, look, if they want me back, they need to change too, right? Like, update the data and the theory in light of a half century of evidence, and then we're talking. Emotional intelligence, I think, is similar. I think it's a really important idea. It's one of the things that separates great leaders from good leaders. It's one of the things we all marvel at when we watch you lead. But I think it's been overrated dramatically. If you look at the evidence, it matters about 4 times less than cognitive intelligence. And in fact, a lot of people will say, well, if you're not brilliant intellectually, then emotional intelligence is a substitute. Actually, they're positively correlated. So if you're good at using your brain to reason and do math and solve logic problems, you're also good at using your brain to read people's feelings and to manage your own emotions. So I think we put the cart before the horse a little bit with the data.
So one of the things you talk about in chapter 7 is on leadership and culture, and I'll share a quote because I think it's really important, particularly with a lot that's going on in our companies and potentially in politics. When a group becomes that cohesive, it develops a strong culture. People share the same values and norms and believe in them intensely. And there's a fine line between having a strong culture and operating like a cult. For nearly half a century, leaders, policymakers, and journalists have accepted the Janus theory of groupthink. Cohesion is dangerous and deadly. To solve problems and make wise decisions, groups need original ideas and dissenting views. So we need to make sure that their members don't get too chummy. But there's just one tiny problem with the cohesion theory. It isn't true. If cohesion doesn't cause groupthink, what does? And how do we stop it?
So I think this is one of those things where when I first started talking about groupthink, the idea that we're all going to get stuck in a majority opinion and not hear dissenting views, people started saying, well, it's got to be cohesion, right? If you like each other too much, you trust each other too much, then you're not going to be willing to listen. And I just wanted to ask, who are your friends if they will not ever let you tell them the truth? And when you look at the evidence, cohesive groups are not more likely to fall into this trap. If anything, they're in slightly better shape, right? Because when people trust each other and respect each other, they're willing to listen even if they disagree. Groupthink seems to be caused by 2 major things. One is overconfidence. So when people get too convinced of their own ideas. We saw this in like the native pigs invasion. We saw this in the NASA Challenger decision. Overconfidence is really deadly. And when you're sure you're going to succeed, you don't question yourself anymore. And then the other factor is reputational concerns. Is it safe to speak up? So groups end up not hearing dissenting views when they feel like they're going to get shut down. I know this is a big priority for you. You go out of your way to make sure everyone can speak their mind and tell you the truth. How?
I mean, it's really important at Facebook, and it's been really important to me because at least what I've seen, and you've seen it too, and we've talked about it, is that as people get more senior, there's a lot of people who will tell you exactly what you want to hear. And so if you want them not to, you have to work hard to get there. So let's talk about gender a little bit, which is you and I have written about gender together, and we know that people respond very differently to men and women who speak up with new ideas. And if you're going to be original, it means you're going to have to convince people of new ideas in the world. What advice do you have for women if it needs to be different, and if so, how?
Having never been a woman, I'm reluctant to give this advice.
But you're a researcher, and you've looked at the data.
Thanks to you. About a year ago, I remember you asking me what my data showed about women and men speaking up, and I had never run the gender analysis, and I had a long flight back to the East Coast. So I spent a bunch of hours reanalyzing the data, and what I found was deeply disturbing, which was consistently, this was true in banks and pharmaceutical companies. When men spoke up, they got rewarded for it. When women spoke up, either they were barely heard and somebody else got credit for their idea, or they were judged as too aggressive. And I was stunned that this still happens in the 21st century in professional organizations. And I went back and reread it again, and I think hands down, the best advice that I picked up about this comes from you, which is when you're going to present your ideas, it's really important to not see self-serving, right? And to say, look, here's a suggestion that I think is going to really serve the group in some way. I haven't come across anything more powerful than that. I'm curious, you advise a lot of women on this. What other guidance can you offer on how to speak up?
Well, it goes to the stereotypes of men and women. Men are allowed to be assertive after results, but we expect women to be in service of others. Now, the good news is a lot of our good ideas and original ideas really are in service of others. And so it's important for everyone to present them that way, but actually particularly important for women. All right, I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to do a lightning round, and then we're going to invite questions from the audience, so pass your cards on. And I know this is something that so many people in this audience care about, because we're not just managers and workers and researchers, but we're also parents. And I think all of us want to raise children that won't just follow the group, but will have original ideas. You argue in this book, and there's an incredible amount of insight here on parenting, that by putting pressure on our children to be high achievers, we actually hurt their success. You have a great quote: practice makes perfect, but it doesn't make new. And you write that teachers often stifle originality too. The most creative children are the least likely to become the teacher's pet. What advice do you have for all of us so we nurture our children to think differently and be originals?
Yeah, I think this is hard. So the first thing is it's more about teaching values than it is teaching rules. So I mess this up all the time as a parent, right? Every time our kids misbehave, I don't even have to stop and think. I will hear coming out of my mouth, "New rule!" And then it never gets enforced, right? There's just another new rule the next time they misbehave. And if you look at the data on parents who raise really creative children, what they do is they focus not on, here are the things you need to do to get rewarded or be punished, but rather, here are the principles that we stand for, and let's have a dialogue about why that's important. That's not to say no rules is a good idea, but when you have rules, you have to explain the why behind them. I think the other thing that I really learned is the way that we praise our kids is often that. So this was eye-opening to me. If you want, let's say you want your kids to be really generous. I always said, wow, thank you for sharing after our kids share toys. Turns out you get more of generous behavior if you say thank you for being a sharer. Or not, thank you for giving, but thank you for being a giver. Because you start to internalize that as part of their identity. And next time you have a chance to say that, it's like, oh, well, I'm the kind of person who would be helpful. Works in the domain of cheating too. So instead of saying don't cheat, you say don't be a cheater. Instead of saying don't lie, you say don't be a liar. And now your behavior casts a shadow. And that makes children feel guilty. And we all know guilt is the gift that keeps on giving. So I think in the domain of originality, what you can do is instead of praising creative artwork, say, wow, you are a creative person. When you have teenagers, instead of saying, you don't have to follow the crowd, you say you are a non-conformist. And they're much more likely than to stand up and say, it's okay to not be a sheep.
Great advice. Okay, lightning round. These are fast answers, and then we're going to take your questions. Better to be a first mover or late entrant?
Late entrants.
Givers or takers?
Givers.
Favorite internet browser? There's something on this in the book. It's really
Firefox.
You don't understand that? Read the book. You will. Most original thing you've ever done?
Not this answer.
Scariest thing you've ever done?
Hurling myself off a 10-meter platform and somersaulting and twisting.
I'm scared every time I see you do it on YouTube. What did you do last time you got writer's block?
I wrote about something else.
Person living or dead you'd most like to have dinner with?
Abraham Lincoln.
Good answer. Favorite original person?
J.K. Rowling.
Favorite magician?
Not David Blaine. No, I would say, this is tough. Leonard Green.
Superpower you wish you had? You have a lot of superpowers.
Invincibility.
Last book you read?
Ten Tops by Chris Anderson.
Next book on your list?
Never Split the Difference.
Kindle or print?
Depends on whether I'm traveling or at home.
Favorite TV show?
All time or now?
All time.
Seinfeld.
Now.
Can I say Vampire Diaries?
Sure. First thing you do in the morning?
Have our kids trample on me usually.
And say you are a trampler.
No.
Last thing you do at night?
Watch The Flash.
Best piece of advice you've ever received?
I love the advice, don't make the right decision, make the decision right.
Good advice. All right. Audience questions.